Our dear old mother's heads are hanging low. Got our orders to Korea.
Can I tell you a story? Go on, try and stop me.
So mothers, don't be sad. They've done made us mad. Korea, 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 here we come.
There was a lot of national service people in Korea, and it was their major experience of the army. To a regular soldier, it was just a campaign. One of many.
Just accepted it as the norm. Just accepted that we'd be called up, and that was normal for anybody who was fit enough to go. Yeah.
You're treated really rough, but there is a psychological reason. At the end of 28 days, you think and act as one man, and you're looking out for each other.
So, as far as I'm concerned, the Korean War had at least two firsts. One, it was the first one under the United Nations. The United Nations actually declared the war, and the British troops were under the Commonwealth division. Now, that had never been done before either. Because the Canadians have got men there, New Zealanders have got men there, and of course the Australians had got men there.
Where's that tiger? Where's that tiger? Here's that tiger. Where's that tiger?
Didn't know where it was, didn't know how to spell it, and nothing whatsoever. I mean, even Churchill, when they said that there was a war on, even Churchill said, "Where the hell's Korea?"
I knew it was in Asia, and that was about it.
So we didn't know an awful lot about it, except it was hilly.
Nothing. Didn't even know where it was.
For now it's goodbye Maria, I'm off to Korea.
And you couldn't go to past Hong Kong until you were, or out of Japan actually, until you were 19. You're supposed to be past your 19th birthday. But they loaded us onto a troop ship in September, which was, I don't know where they got this ship from. I think it was held together by the rust. It was absolutely horrendous.
We knew we'd arrived by the smell of the place. God. And we were met by American marching band out there. Well, they were playing Hold That Tiger as we came in the Tigers, Leicesters.
We were told if we wanted to, we could go with these troops to the station. So only 3 people were still on board. The rest came off, and we carried the soldiers' kit to the station and loaded them up, and they went up the front line the same night. I mean, it was only 50 miles away, the front line then.
But we got off at Busan, we got straight on the train and up to Seoul.
And then straight onto the train, wooden seats, all your kit and everything. I think it was on that 24 hours or so. And it stop, start, and every time it stopped, somebody had to get out on guard, because there was quite a few of the North Koreans and that had got left behind. They were up in the hills and so on.
On the road, on the way up, we passed a railway engine which was lying on its side with lots of holes in it, which made us look at one another and wonder what we were coming into.
We were given a meal and then shipped off. Various regiments were picked up by lorries and taken off to just behind the front lines, the headquarters of whatever regiment you were in.
And it looked like a country from the backwoods, you know, it just really did.
I thought to myself, good Lord, you know, what a godforsaken place.
Where's that tiger? Where's that tiger? Here's that tiger. Where's that tiger?
In Korea, everything was on the hill, and we must have been really fit to run up and down the hills like we did.
Because there was nothing there. I mean, you saw the country, it was just hills with rough scrub on it because all the trees, what trees had been blown to bits, and so it's just rough scrub and up one hill and down the next and up the next one, and some were bigger than others, and that was it. Dirt tracks, no roads, no, not tarmacs.
I don't think we were very well equipped in Britain, or we hadn't forecast very much in those days. So if it hadn't been for the Americans and for the American equipment, which a lot of people wore most of the time, it was pretty difficult.
I was issued with tropical kit. That's, you know, lightweight kit, which was all right in the summer but useless in the winter, obviously.
I mean, that could get quite hot in the summer as well, yeah. And that was physically demanding, that was, yeah. Especially if you're on patrol and not carrying all that equipment, you know, about 50 odd pounds worth of equipment and humping up and down these hills.
But it was the winds that were the problem. It's a whip down from Siberia and Manchuria, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Blow right through you.
The other thing was, of course, vehicles froze up. You couldn't leave vehicles standing, stopped overnight. You had to switch them on from time to time in order to make sure the circulation, otherwise they just froze.
When I was in the hospital, I remember there was a couple of guys there who'd lost limbs with frostbite. Yeah.
Soon it was spring. And everything turned to mud. Mud, mud, mud.
Wet, slimy, sliding road conditions, mud.
There was also the monsoon season as well, and that was a nightmare too, when you got 3-4 days continuous rain, and because everything was soaked. I mean, you were lying in water in the trench, and I mean, that wasn't comfortable at all.
The only consolation was occasionally you could see the moon. And when you could see the moon, you know that 11 hours later, that's to be back home, over England.
So keep the home fires burning.
You learnt to survive, and basically that was it. I mean, somebody told me I would have lived in an hole in the ground, and midwinter, I wouldn't have believed it, but...
Living in a slit trench, about 6 feet by 3 feet. As soon as you got on a position, you'd dig in. You'd dig a hole in the ground and get some cover on it, and that's where you slept. That's where you lived, basically. So you might be there for a couple of weeks, now you move on, you did the same thing again. And as I say, in the monsoon season, your trench would fill with water. Everything gets soaked, all your bedding and everything.
But the smaller the better. You didn't have these, not like the First World War, we had these great big cavernous trenches. Of course, the idea were the smaller the trench, the harder the target. And it was enough, but you kept your actual dugouts, you'd probably about 6 foot by 5 foot, something like that, in area. Enough for 2 blokes in it.
We call them hoochies, because it's a Japanese word meaning home. A bit of sarcasm with the ours, but that's what we call them.
We used to make a space heater out of a couple of shell casings, an ammunition box. And if you were fortunate enough to be able to get hold of some petrol, you used to make a drip feed petrol. And but else otherwise you used to burn a bit of wood. And you could make them dugouts quite comfortable, really.
You're in a dugout to start with, so you're underground. Most of the time I had 3 boards, 3 planks underneath me, and that was it. If you find some angle iron or some wire, you could probably rig up a bit of a bed, but there's very little stuff about, you see.
We had sleeping bags and all. Had a inner bag and an outer bag, so well, trouble is you didn't have a lot of time to get in them. As soon as you got in, got comfortable, then you're out on stag, on guard. So, but you were all right. You were all right. You were very good.
you never took your clothes off, your boots off. You just slept in your clothes, wrapped a couple of blankets around you and get your head down, use your pack as a pillow. Yeah.
Your summer, your jungle greens, you could trade in. You used to, the Americans organised the laundry, and you put them into a pack, wrapped them up, put your name and rank on them. You were lucky if you got the same ones back.
Every now and again, when you were lucky, you could get back to the bath unit and get a fresh kit. So occasionally, didn't happen very often, but you could occasionally use a few cigarettes to get one of the porters to go, wash your shirt out or something like that.
The cold weather, of course, meant you couldn't bathe, so consequently you got lice in embarrassing places, which you got rid of by dousing yourself with diesel fuel. In the summer, we only had to walk from where I was anyway, 50 yards, down a path, straight into the Imgym. And of course you used to go and bathe in the Imgym every day, tablets of soap, and go and give yourself a darn good bath.
We didn't have any showers. The British didn't. The Canadians had showers, so we used to have to go for a shower once, if you were lucky, once every 6 weeks or 2 months. And the problem was that in the summer, you went in an open top truck. And of course there was dust flying all over the place. So when you got to the shower point, you were covered in dust, which was, you had a nice long shower. Thank you very much, Canadians, very good of you. But then you got in the truck again and went back to your place. By the time you get to your place, you were covered in dust again, so.
Now this rain in Korea sure gets cold and wet.
And then the winters came and it got darn cold. I mean, it really, really got cold. And when we first got there, we had just the normal uniforms we'd worn in England, battle dress. And they gave us navy grey coat, duffel coats. But the trouble was they were white, and it hadn't snowed then, so you stood out like a on the sun, so they didn't last long. But when the British combat kit arrived, it was damn good stuff.
Oh dear me, the list of clothes you wore: 2 pairs of socks for the Korean winter, underclothes, long johns, string vest, woolen vests, thick army shirt, sweater, battle dress, battle top tunic, semi-waterproof trousers, rubber-soled boots, which were unheard of in those days, a big thick parka with a fur-lined hood on it, and you're pretty warm in that, pretty warm.
We had a cap comforter hat, and then, well, it was like a lumberjack's hat, as I could describe it. So you'll see it in the photos I've got there. And that was it. And gloves, we had mittens that come up, and then a pair of mittens that were 3 compartment, and then overgloves after that.
You were that much on, you could hardly move then, so it was a bit awkward in one sense.
But that led to problems sometimes, because if you went on a patrol or anything and it was really, really cold, you didn't want to get sweat on because it would freeze. So, you know, you had to be so careful, like, you know. But when we got these gears, that was all right. But the weather, as we went on, when we went into the line and went into action and the winters really came, we only used to take our boots off about one night in 3. One section out of each platoon, which would be about 8 to 10 men, because they used to, the boots would freeze, you see.
And I actually left my boots on the floor. I put my clothes, you put clothes on to go to bed, not off, but I put my small pack under my pillow. I went to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, my boots were frozen solid to the floor, and I had to wait till the lad got out of bed next to me and said, give my boots a kick so I can put them on, because I couldn't get them off the floor.
During this period when it was so cold like that, I got sent up into the Crow's Nest as a mine lookout. Well, it was ridiculous, because you were standing in there looking for mines, the ship's going up and down, it's blowing a blizzard. Well, I couldn't see anything, so I shouted down to the bridge, I can't see anything and I'm that cold I can't do anything. Sit down then. They wouldn't let me come down because they were transmitting to Daventry at the time, because wireless aerials were quite near to you coming down from the mast. And I was up there for an hour, and the sailmaker had to come up and help me get down. I was that frozen. I'll never forget that. I was hoping the sick bay would send up some medicinal rum, but they didn't.
Tiger, where's that tiger? Here's that tiger. Where's that tiger? Here's that tiger.
We used to try and finish up try and work it so that we went for lunch at either the Canadians or the Americans, because their food was a lot better than ours. And they used to give you K rations, the Americans, you know, with cigarettes and chocolate in and all this, which was very, so I suppose you'd call us scroungers really.
When we were up the line, it was all American compo rations, sea rations they called them. And you got a box, and that was 24-hour rations in that. You had 3 meals, which were 3 tins, perhaps hamburgers or pork and beans or something like that, you know. You had a tin with the sweets in it, like jelly discs, chocolate discs. And then you had a tin with a small solid methylated cooker you could warm a can on, little tin opener, book of matches, and 20 cigarettes.
The best part of those, there was a tin with 2 or 3 little biscuits in, and there was a tiny thing of jam, and there was this disc of to make a drink, and that was a very nice drink. It was a sort of a, I don't know how you describe it, a really milky Ovaltine or something like that, and that made a nice drink. That was about the best part of the lot.
But I mean, we relied on the Americans for a lot of stuff. All the food we used to, after we'd been on C7s for a while, they decided they'd try and give us 2 hot meals a week, cooked back at Edgelon and then brought up on tanks or carriers. And it mainly used to be stew, whether it was turkey, pork or what have you, but it didn't matter, it was great, you know.
You got some roast chicken, you got potatoes, and also vegetables, some fresh vegetables. They grew some quite obviously onions and things like that. They grew in Korea anyway, but some of the vegetables came from there, and the meals were quite good. They weren't a luxury, but they were basic, but adequate. You know.
Somebody on with A Company at one time, they shot a wild boar, so we had a real feast. We've been on American C7 rubbish for I don't know how long, and all of a sudden it's turned up with a round of bread and a piece of this wild boar on it. That was a real feast, that was, better than any Christmas dinner.
Sometimes what you'd do, you'd save all your American rations up or the other, then you'd have a bit of a feast at night. And cook it up on the stove. And we was lucky that we were allowed a beer ration, and we also got a tot of rum during the winter day. And one or two didn't get that, but we were always, had a tot of rum. And of course, we used to save a drop of that.
Because I reckon they used to get ice cream up the line, you know.
I mean, we used to dine well with them. You had turkeys, ice cream. We didn't have ice cream, but they'd always get some ice cream from somewhere.
When we were going up the line, they were coming down. We used to shout them, "Gee guys, didn't we rough it? 3 days without ice cream."
I got the rotation blues.
In the army, most of the time in the army, it was a 24-hour day. Sometimes it was a 36-hour day. And a few times it was longer than a 36-hour day.
But that was it. I mean, there was no nights off or days off or weekends off. You were just there and that was it, you know.
You didn't get a lot of time because you were kept busy. I mean, you weren't on office hours. If there was a ship in, you were unloading, whether it was all night or all day or what have you.
No, we spent some time sleeping, you know. You could sit there and all of a sudden, whether we're being in the fresh air all the time or not, I don't know. But of course, during the night, you see, it was the old 2 on 4 off stag sort of thing. So you never had what you could call a full night's sleep. So you took every opportunity you could to sleep.
Rat infested. They used to have rats in Korea as big as cats. Unbelievable they were. And you could wake up at night with one running across your sleeping bag and, oh dear. You have heard that of those that got into the sleeping bags was some fellas, but I was lucky. Didn't happen to me.
There were deer. There were deer there. And believe it or not, pheasants and partridge. Quite a few of them. And then my brother, he come up one day and says, look at this, what we got for dinner. And he shot this pheasant. Yeah, it looked nice. What was left of it, he used a blooming Sten gun at it. There weren't much on it. You couldn't tell with the feathers sort of thing. But yeah, there was that. I mean, there was all that sort of thing, and there were snakes and all. They weren't very. I think there were 10 varieties of snakes there, and about 2 were poisonous, I think.
Some were quite dangerous, apparently. I remember my buddy, he went in his trench one day and lifted his pack, and there was a snake coiled underneath it. Anyway, he shot it, and one of the local porters come in and looked at it and said, harmless, you know. Yeah.
The thing is, that used to be the time when you were on stag at night, and the crickets or whatever, there used to be chirping frogs or whatever, you hear this noise. And you'd be like this, you'd be sort of dozy with them. And then all of a sudden they'd stop. And that minute, you were wide awake. You were wide awake. And then they'd be dead silent for a bit, and then they'd start again. And once they started again, you felt relaxed there. Of course, while they were chirping, there was everybody creeping up.
Well, malaria, obviously, mosquitoes. Yeah. Because we had took a tablet every day, a malaria tablet. Yeah.
To combat malaria, you were issued in the summer with a mosquito net, and we also were given aerosol sprays. So if you heard a mosquito, you just do this all over the place, and the high-pitched whine would stop. And sometimes in the morning, if you'd done that, you wake up with 2 or 3 mosquitoes on your net. No, they were no worry, providing you kept taking your Mepacrin tablets. If you didn't, you were in trouble with chargeable offence.
Just a few more weeks, rotation's gonna set me free.
I was lucky enough to get an R&R, rest and recuperation leave, in Tokyo. and you were flown out to Tokyo in a Dakota C-54 planes, and you spent a week or 5 days at the Ibisu Hotel in Tokyo. And a place that springs to mind in Tokyo is the Ginza, where all the shops are and all the shopping and everything. And it was lovely to sleep in a bed and have your meals brought to you to table like a hotel. Fantastic, you know, even if it was only 5 days. But the only trouble is we hadn't got enough money. So whereas Americans used to be spending money right, left and centre, and the Canadians, poor old British used to have scrounged what they could. I think we were the only country out there who weren't paid hardship.
Yeah, it was a good place for a good run ashore, but you didn't want to be in the same bar as Australians because they were nuts. They'd fight over nothing and anybody, it didn't matter.
There was another place, another camp where some went, which was in Korea. That was Incheon. I think it was Incheon, which was a camp used similarly. So some went there and some didn't. You know, but you only got one go, and some didn't even get at all. Of course, it was just your luck.
The Americans used to have entertainment companies, and they were usually jazz bands and a few singers. And some of their stars came out. I remember seeing, I think it was Danny Kaye. And I remember going to a British one, Ethel Redmond, you've never heard of her, she was one of the old musical stars. And she, you used to go down and say a few at a time because you're still in the line or in reserve. And you go down and do it on the back of do a show on the back of a 3-ton. I always remember watching Ethel Redmond. I thought it one of the best shows I'd ever seen, you know.
And then you had the hypnotists and magicians and all that. Yeah, there were some cracking entertainers used to come out there.
So we built a cinema. Well, it was a dining tent. We got a white mosquito net, stretched it over a board and then whitewashed it. And we used to have, and then we used to get the films from the Army Kinema Corps. And we used to get lads coming to watch the films as well.
When you were in reserve, it was a bit easier then. You had quite a lot of activities going on there. Now you'd have shower facilities and that sort of thing, laundry facilities, games, play games, and football and that. Yeah.
We wanted a football pitch. We hadn't got a football pitch, and we were there, and the company commander, and I was talking to Sergeant Major how we'll get a football pitch. And there was this American grader come by, one of them grades, and they sent one bloke to go and stop him, ask him to come up to see him, and they wanted him to level this paddy field out for a football patch. And went into what was the officers' mess like, and come out loaded up with whiskey and gin and that. Be here tomorrow, and they were, and they come up and they levelled, 2 of them come and they levelled that down, and then they wanted goalposts. Next thing you know, they're putting goalposts up, and then they decided to invite all their friends up for a football match with. And they come in great wagons, brought all their own food stuff and their own cooking utensil, and cooked a lovely meal, and we had a game of football.
He was such a die-hard soldier, this Sergeant Major. He made us get some white sand from the Imjim, banks of the Imjim, and he found a place. He said, I'll build a square here. And he found a bit of flat, which is unusual in Korea. He found a bit of flat, and he made us put this white sand on this square, and he said, that's my square now. And he said, we'll train on that, and we'll get the roll call on that and everything, and you know, he'd call you out about 7 o'clock in the morning and line up and roll call, and he'd have you drilling there sometimes, when you were off duty from the wirelesses. I mean, there were 21 countries there. They were all different from different nations, different cultures, different way of working and everything, but it was the first time that a Commonwealth division had been formed.
Our headquarters was all mixed. You had Canadians, you had Australians, British. I don't think anyone gave it a thought. It was a true Commonwealth, I think.
Well, I think the vast majority got on all right, no problems. Until you just knuckle down and that was it. Well, you had no choice anyway, so you might make the best of it. I think nearly everybody, I suppose, grumbled because they had to leave their own regiment. But once you'd done it, that was it. I mean, one or two of them were rebadged 2 or 3 times for different reasons. But,
we had a lot of envy we envied the Yanks. We used to feel that we were superior to them because they couldn't rough it like we could, because that was the general attitude. And they had far better equipment than us, and they were far better looked after than us, there's no doubt.
Going up to the forward position, the United States Secondary Infantry Division put a great big sort of trellis over the road leading into the divisional headquarters, including their motto, "Second to none." Very good. I mean, it wasn't seen by the enemy. The only thing was, there was a New Zealand signals platoon just further down the road, which was there to maintain contact with the division. So the day after this sign appeared, another sign appeared on the New Zealand side, "None," which was taken down fairly rapidly after some comments were made, I understand.
We had Korean porters attached to the battalion, which used to carry up the water, the rations, the ammunition, but they were real peasants, and they'd been conscripted, forcibly conscripted, and they were watched over by what they called the Korean Field Police, and they were vicious, absolutely, you know, not nice people.
The city was absolutely devastated. You know, there were bare bones of buildings, burnt out buildings, machine gun fire rounds hitting the walls of buildings, pan tiles off the roofs, and the peasants walking around in abject poverty.
It remains with you, the despair, the utter despondency and helplessness of these people with their little packs on their back, trudging for hours along the road. And we had to turn them back, obviously. We couldn't let them go anywhere forward. They didn't realise that they would be in enemy country. But it was my wide opening. It was really opened your eyes.
The Chinese, I always used to think, they either came on you and you didn't even know they were there, or else they let you know you were coming. It was one of the, you know, they could sneak up and be within a couple of 100 yards, say, of you, and you wouldn't know they were there till they got up and started to come at you. Or else you'd hear them forming up for an hour and a half before, and there'd be bugles going, lights, and goodness knows what. But I thought, you know, no hate, I mean, no, you just did what you had to do, you know. I mean, if they'd have left me alone, I'd have willingly left them alone.
And they had been using the propaganda quite a lot, which they were very good at. It used to put the hairs on the back of your neck rise. It sounded as if it was outside your slit trench.
They'd creep up to the wire and pin them on the wire overnight, and think you get up in the morning and you see these leaflets sticking on the wire. And of course it was telling you, you know, how your loved ones at home were missing you and all this, and that your wife had gone off with somebody else and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the political situation, you know, that you were a lucky of the American imperialists and
What you couldn't see was what the Chinese did, of course, was to bury themselves in the ground. They dug tunnels everywhere. They didn't have air superiority, so they had to move everything by night. And they didn't have vehicles, so they had to move everything by porters.
Oh, the Chinese were a formidable lot, they were. The worst were when they used to come at you in droves. Frightening spectacle that were. But, you know, it's not very nice.
But later on, the impression of the Chinese troops were they were good on that terrain. They could handle the country better than we could. And they were damn brave, because they used to run in against a terrific firepower.
Just like a swarm of ants in there, as you can say. But then when them as medium machine guns opened up, that used to cut a lot of them down like side, and we relied on his mortars as well. They played havoc with them as well. And then they got the wire to contend with, because we had miles of barbed wire, and of course that slowed them down a bit, but sheer weight of numbers. It's and then they used to stand there blowing bugles and that, and noise and that. Anybody that says they weren't frightened, they're telling a lie, quite honest, because I was scared stiff, I must admit. And then there were some brave lads amongst them.
MacArthur decided that he was going to do a landing at Incheon and try and cut the country in half, trapping all the North's army down south. It didn't quite work out that way, and it was like a miniature Normandy landing. You know, same sort of thing, but only on a smaller scale. But it was a bit hairy for them, because Incheon has a rise and fall of the tide of 32 foot, and it's all mud banks, and that was really dodgy for them. When they were all settled ashore, we then started going farther north, and wherever there was railway lines or roads or anything, we used to shell them. And for a month, every night, we used to get right inshore and shell the runway on Seoul Airport, one round every 15 minutes to stop them flying stuff down. Targets are set up from what they call the Director Control Tower above the bridge. All orders came down from there, and the guns were fired from up there. Well, you're all enclosed, so it's not a hell of a bang, it's sort of a whoomph, hydraulics, you see. Sometimes we would go round to the eastern coast, which the Americans took, and there was a place called Wonsan. There was a railway tunnel, and they had a gun, which I should think it would be no more than a 3-inch, on a railway wagon. And as you went round, this would come out of the tunnel, fire off 3 or 4 rounds quick, and then straight back in the tunnel. And this was happening quite regularly, and our skipper got fed up with this. So, fair enough, the blue bricks all round the tunnel entrance, we shelled them and dropped the lot down and shut them in the tunnel.
I'm a lonely soldier sitting in Korea.
You never really understand what it's like until you're actually there.
You were always in danger, but being 20 and silly, you don't appreciate the danger as much as other people. I mean, we had a regular with us and he was brilliant. We were young and silly, we knew no fear. We were, you know, a lad of 18, at 19, 20, had to be 20. You know no fear. So, I mean, he kept us in check and told us to keep our heads down when it was necessary and move on when it wasn't, you know. And I was grateful that we'd got somebody like that.
It's funny, you didn't think about being injured, you didn't think about being killed. I don't know why, but it was going on all around you.
I think I was probably more excited than scared. The scared bits came afterwards.
Well, you're obviously a wee bit nervous, but you're that busy that you know, it's only afterwards you think, oh, what the hell's been going on here?
Mobile War was the first year. The second part of the Korean War was 2 years, and it was fairly static along what was the so-called 38th parallel, but it's not anything like a straight line, because the contours of the hills made it more important to get a secure defensive position than it is to stay on a straight line.
Most of the attacks going on, certainly from the time when I was in the division, from June 52 to 53, it was aiming for better possession of the commanding heights over the 38th parallel.
There were loads of patrols, standing patrols, which were 3 or 4 guys, 100 yards or so in front of the trenches.
You'd have a listening patrol sort of thing where you go to a certain spot and you sit waiting, listening for the enemy creeping up.
Or you had a reconnaissance patrol where an officer and 1 or 2 men, a signaller perhaps, and another guy would go out creeping around looking and listening. Their job wasn't to kill anybody, or preferably anyway. They were there to observe and bring information back. But that could get pretty scary if it was on a moonlit night.
But the basic training helped you to adapt to whatever situation you were in. For instance, in Korea, I was in charge of 15 vehicles on a spotter flight 2.5 miles behind the lines. Occasionally, my boss, Captain Perkins, later Major General Perkins, he was the MTO, said, staff, he said, get your jeep and your rifle and your bandolier and your tin hat. I said, yes sir, where are we going? He said, up to the forward observation post. So I said, no you haven't, you're going to take me up to the forward OPs. And you know, although we occasionally were under fire there from mortar fire, you learn to accept it. You know, well, this is war. I mean, you were afraid. If you said you weren't afraid, you were a liar.
We'd got down in the mortar pit and all of a sudden there was a little sound and sand kept coming out of this sandbag at the side of me. I thought, what's done that? So I poked in and I pulled this piece of shrapnel out and dropped it a bit quick. It red hot. It's about that 2-3 inches long, and I suppose that thick all round, jagged of course. Well, it was a bit close, that but that was the nearest I got.
But there was a chimney, quite a high chimney, and the Yanks had been shelling this and shelling it, couldn't hit it, and we hit it halfway up. The next day we had a signal from the American commander congratulating us on our gunnery, because they were rubbish.
I was flying as his rear observer one day and I got the map on my knee. I looked down and saw some flashes, coordinates, wrote them on a piece of paper, tapped him on the shoulder, handed them to him. He looked at them, rolled them up and threw them back at me. So when we landed, I said, excuse me sir, I said, I gave you some coordinates and some gunfire on the floor. He said, Sergeant, we don't bring artillery down on our own mortars. I got the map the wrong way around.
And I can remember first RTR, I had to go up there and sort out some problems, so I took the jeep up the back. You always got to remember we had air cover in Korea all the time, which was very significant because of course you could move, providing you weren't in view of the enemy, you could move about. So I took the jeep up and drove up to the base of this hill, climbed up. You then had to go over there was a part, there was a bit of a mound here, and the Centurions were parted so that the gun was pointing over the edge of the earth, if you like, but the tank was hidden. But to get there, you had to go over a place which was used by the Chinese. Anybody moving on it, you probably got a shell over it. So you started from there, you moved quickly across, and the shell came, fortunately, behind you, normally one way or the other. So that's what you did, and I sorted out whatever the problems were. Exactly the same thing happened. You went back, another shell came over, and that was there.
We laid really, the raw signals and the line really laid a network of communications from Pusan right up to the Imjin. And you know, and obviously some receptions were better than others because it was so hilly out there. It was so hilly, so mountainous. It was difficult to find a fat plane, I mean, even in the valleys. And when you're on the line, going out renewing the lines, it was difficult because, first of all, there were a lot of landmines about, and also there were snipers about.
The snipers are very good shots too. Thankfully, they didn't all get a score hit, but when I came off stand 2, which was in the forward trenches, and things had apparently been quiet apart from these messages. That there were some were recordings and they played us music, and some were just talking. As I came out of the dugout into the trench, a sniper fired, and it went between my right ear and my right shoulder and hit into the sandbags nearby. Now, I wasn't very happy with that. I did use some foreign language. Because the thoughts of ever getting home were getting worse.
And we had a signaller with us, just for experience and familiarising them. And this officer went out with this Australian signaller. If it hadn't been the Australian signaller, I suppose it would have been one of us, me or any of the other 3. And they went out on this reconnaissance patrol, and that was the last anybody saw of them. They were creeping around on reconnaissance, looking, and they obviously ran into trouble. I was on duty on the radio in the headquarters dugout, and we got one message from the Australian signaller, and the message was just "boss down," which meant the officer had been shot. After that, nothing else was heard of them, so one assumes they were either captured and then killed, because they didn't come back with the returning prisoners of war.
The Chinese managed to land just 3 stray shells, and one right through the tent, and the lad next to me, who was my brain gun at the time, he got hit shrapnel all the way down his arms and his leg, and the chap our sleeping bags were all touching each other, 2 were away, he was killed and there were 4 other wounded, you know, so I mean that, how charmed I was dead lucky. Wasn't any better than anybody else, it's luck, you know, it doesn't mean you just sheer luck.
That's the first time I've seen death, and it's a bit of a shake-up, you know, when you've got a chap there that, as I say, 19 years of age, and you're loading him onto a stretcher. You know, all of a sudden you realise what, you know, life is, and
you were quiet for a bit, and then you had to callous though it may sound, shrug your shoulders, say, well, thank God it wasn't me, and anyway, there's a war on and these things happen. That was my approach to it. But yes, it didn't do to dwell on those things, otherwise your own morale would have gone. No, I think when a platoon of men under those conditions are very close, and if you in difficulty they will help each other.
Now this rain in Korea sure gets cold and wet.
It was actually my 21st birthday, and I got blown up that day. It was fairly warm. I'd taken my tunic off, had that lying on the parapet on the top of sandbags, and suddenly there was 3 mortars dropped. One hit the front of the parapet, 2 hit the observation post next door, and hit a box of grenades. It killed 3 in there. The one that hit me smashed the gun. Shrapnel went through the breech of the gun. And there was a water cooling tank, gallon tank. Burst that, severed the tube, and my tunic was in shreds. That was hanging on the bush. So you know, and I was fine. I was fine. I thought, oh, I couldn't believe it. Anyway, they got me. A month later, they got me.
Mortar blast in my eyes, and I was evacuated by helicopter to a place called Norwegian MASH, a Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. From there was took to Seoul, put on a Dakota, and then flew to Kure in Japan, 29 British Military Hospital in Kure. My eyes were bandaged up for about 3 weeks. Unfortunately, there were no lasting damage. A bit of scouring and all that, but fortunately my eyes weren't all right. And then ever since I've had to wear glasses. But I had a piece of shrapnel in a sliver of shrapnel and went up in my cheek. I had one in the leg and a piece in my arm. It's a sensation when you're loaded onto an helicopter and all you can hear is the whishing of the rotors, because you only got a bit of a cover over your head, that's all, and blanket. It's a good job I couldn't see, because I don't think I'd have been very happy with it. But them helicopter pilots, them American helicopter pilots, they were marvellous. Everyone ought to have had a VC. Because no matter where, as soon as you got the word, they were there picking anybody up. And they were absolutely marvellous. I couldn't speak too highly of them.
When I was killed, I was put on the troop deck. But I did notice there was a chap from the Gloucesters in the hospital, and he used to go out and lean on the railings, and all of a sudden he used to start screaming, "They're coming, the Chinese are coming, the Chinese are coming," and a nurse would go up and say, "No, you're perfectly all right, you're perfectly all right," and take him quietly back in again. But there were people who suffered post-traumatic stress disorders. It was never heard of in those days.
This rain in Korea sure gets cold and wet.
November the 5th, remember it well, Guy Fawkes night. And we were mortared from all the way across there, which I always used to think was the worst part of Korea, the mortars. You felt so helpless, you couldn't go back. Get the order to fix base, and I thought, I wasn't planning on getting that close myself. That was the first thought, that came to my mind. But anyway, we went in and we got into the slits amongst the Chinese and to the top of the hill. When we got to the top, we looked down the other side, and coming up the other side looked like somebody had kicked the top off an anthill. There were what looked like to be thousands. I suppose there weren't thousands, but there was certainly about 4 to 5 to 1 of us. And I heard the company commander say, "Oh, too many for us lads, start to withdraw." And I thought, "I'm with you, mate," because that was when the shock hit him, because that was the very, very first time, I mean, it's pure excitement while it's happening. But then when it happens, there's no training can ever get you, into that position.
Well, we'd been under bombardment for days and days prior to that. We knew something was coming off. And a couple of nights before, we could hear like tanks moving up, the self-propelled guns and that. You could hear them overnight, the noise of the trucks, and you could hear all the digging and banging. And you wake up in the morning, and there'd be trenches coming all the way down the hill up to your positions. One morning we woke up and there was a huge banner at the bottom of the hill, and it said, they knew the unit we were, because it had KOSBs, tomorrow the hilltop will be your graveyard. That was the day before the battle, yeah. You were generally pretty safe in a dugout, unless you got a direct hit, yeah. I remember on the big battle, the 5th of November, I don't think we'd very few casualties till we got attacked. Suddenly we heard the bugles going, and that's what they used to do, the Chinese, they'd attack en masse, blowing the bugles and clashing the cymbals. And I mean, that was frightening in itself, charging up the hill and all this noise and racket. So all I had was a rifle. So the lieutenant suggested this guy come in with the Bren gun to give us some backup. And he got hit. He staggered back and he had a hole in his cheek. And he said to me, "I've been hit. Can you see anything?" I said, "Yeah, you got a hole there." And he totally lost it. He got up in the parapet and he was swearing and shit, "Come on, you bastards." And the next thing he got hit again, he fell back. He got hit in the stomach. So he was out of the game. So we're left on my own. And then I got hit. I got hit with a LMG machine gun. I got blasted with that. And it hit me down the left shoulder and arm. We got cut off. We didn't know what was happening. We lost contact with the rest of the battalion. So we had to fight our way out. It was dark. It was early hours in the morning. So all them that couldn't walk were put on stretchers. They got all the wounded out, got them on stretchers. If you could walk, then you had to walk down the hill. And then we'd try to get back to the lines, our own lines, which we did. And when I got back there, I got dressed at the dressing station, which was an Indian unit, 16th Field Ambulance Unit. So I got dressed there, and then I got shipped out by a helicopter down to the marsh.
Here's that tiger, where's that tiger, here's that tiger.
One of the last battles of the war was the Hook, where that went on for, well, certainly I didn't get any sleep for 3 nights, 3 days, 3 days and nights. We pulled in every vehicle that we could find to bring ammunition up from the roadhead, from the railhead.
The Hook was named because it looked like a fisherman's hook on the end of his line. The contours of this place, and it stuck out into no man's land. So you actually got, when you're on the forward slope, you'd got the enemy on both sides and in front of you. They really hit us hard with shelling. It really was horrific. Unfortunately, that night I was one of a patrol which was on the forward slopes of the Hook itself. The nearest 2 lads to me were on my right, and one was from Perth in Scotland, and the other lad was from Middlesex area down in London area, and I was from the Midlands, and all 3 of us were wounded, but these 2 lads were badly wounded, and there was nothing we could do to move them up the hill or down the hill. The officer was unconscious, he was wounded in the middle of this, and the lad on the radio receiver, the wireless system, came over and said, the radio's no good. They didn't work very well going uphill and downhill. They were all right on flat ground, but also to take a bit of a battering because he'd put it on his head to protect his head. So I sent him back in to tell them we could do with some help. But there wasn't going to be any help. They were then took out our barbed wire entanglement on the front line, which unfortunately sent it down the hill to where we were. And they came down the hill cartwheeling like a kiddie's toy that you may have seen these little bits of come down the stairs. Well, these two came down, but they were so far away that I just ignored them. But unfortunately, with being knocked down a few times, one got me, and it came over my head. And I was getting a little bit uptight because I'd got some barbed wire on my head and shoulders. My shoulder wasn't very well. I got a difficulty seeing out of my right eye. And I tried to pull it off. My Sten gun was lying on the floor, and I bent down to put the magazine back into that. When a Chinese came up the hill. Now, that poor soul, I think he was, when I look back, I think he was out of his mind, really. He was grinning all over his face. Now, we've always been told they were given drugs. Now, I don't know. He saw me, and I thought he was grinning at me. I honestly did, but I was so incensed. I picked up the Sten gun, cocked it, and shot him. And I felt guilty ever since. Because he fell over the ridge in the re-entrant, and I didn't see him again.
People refer to it as the Forgotten War, but I think it's partly true, because it was an important campaign. It's been overtaken by events, particularly with the development of communications and everything else. It was the last of the old wars.
And somebody would say, oh, I've not seen you for a long time. Where you been? Well, I've been out Korea. Where's that?
I mean, you say to people, I was like, where's Korea? And you showed, oh, that little bit of land there. Oh, didn't even know that was there.
It was an experience that really remains with you forever.
It was a difficult time, in height of rationing and that, you know. People had more on their plate than worry about an obscure war thousands of miles away. No, I don't think. I don't think there was much attention paid to it then, and probably even less now.
As I say, lots of folk never knew it existed even, and as I say, I think one of the reasons probably is because it was a United Nations force. It wasn't a British force as such. It wasn't even just the Commonwealth. It was all under United Nations, so I think they tend to ignore us a bit.
So it became known as the Forgotten War, and that is very true. Very true. Except the Koreans, they've always thought quite highly of us and our allies, and they've looked after our dead. There's a very, very nice memorial in Seoul.
We did as good a job as we could there, and we've done as good a job as we can, so the lads were still there, in keeping the memory alive.
Hopefully, and somewhere down the line, somebody will listen to this or see it, whatever. I don't know how many centuries these films last before they deteriorate.
It's nice to know that it's going down on record for future generations. It shows somebody cares. Yeah, no, that's very nice. Yeah, appreciate it, really.
That big eight-wheeler rolling down the track means your true loving daddy ain't coming back.
Raymond Bennett, born 6th of June 1932 in Inkley.
James Scully Bridges, my date of birth was the 28th of the 10th 1930, and I was born in Stirling, Scotland.
Kenneth David Cornwell, 18th of the 9th 33. I was born in Nottingham.
Frederick John Darwent, 9th of the 9th 1930, born at Stanton-under-Baden.
Name George Greaves. Date of birth 31st of July 1931. I was born at Norton Disney in Lincolnshire.
Kenneth William Haywood, 13429, Leicester.
Michael John Outridge, and I was born in Leicester at St Barnabas Nursing Home on the 2nd of June 1929.
William Anthony Stevens, date of birth is the 22nd of the 8th, 1931. I was born in the front room of 362 Ayleston Road.
Neil Francis Townsend, 17th of April 1928, born in Glossop, Derbyshire.
My full name is Lawrence Stanley Wood. I was born in South Shields on the Tyneside in 1932.
I'm rolling on. You've broken your vow and it's all over now, so I'm moving on. You switched your engine, now I ain't got time for a trifling woman on my main line, 'cause I'm moving on. You done your daddy wrong. I warned you twice, now you can settle the price, 'cause I'm moving on.